Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess and today I'm super excited because we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in 2024. And I read quite a few. This I think was one of my best reading years ever. I don't think I've ever read this many books probably in my life. So I'm very excited to tell you guys all about it. I love watching these videos from other people just because even though I always do monthly recaps of everything that I read and also TBRs, I just feel like it's nice to have everything in like one concise place in case I want any kind of recommendations from my favorite booktubers or things like that. So hopefully this gives you guys some recommendations too. And before we get started, if you guys are not already subscribed, please consider subscribing. It really helps out my channel and I'm really trying to grow my channel in 2025. So I'd really appreciate you guys to stick around, see some more videos. If you guys ever want to see other reading videos specifically, I do vlogs and reading videos. I do have a full playlist of reading videos specifically that you can always check out. I'll put it in the cards up here, wherever that is. But I also have all of my vlogs and my reading videos all in the description below. All of that's out of the way now. We can talk about all of the books that I read and I'm just gonna go through. I have my Goodreads up on my phone. We're just gonna talk about all of the books that I read. And I'm gonna try to go and remember like each and every one of these books. And it's gonna be a little bit tough for me just because I don't know if I'll remember what each one was about, but we're gonna do our best. I have all of my ratings and if for some reason I can't remember, then we'll go through the synopsis as well. I also am just going to say in advance, I apologize if you guys can hear any kind of like background noise or anything like that. It is extremely windy today, so sorry. Okay, so the very first book that I read in 2024 was The Green Mile by Stephen King, and this one actually ended up being my #1 book that I gave 5 stars for the year as well. So #1 book was my first book of the year, which is insane. Obviously, this one was rated 5 stars, and I will never forget this one. I distinctly remember reading it, and then I like watched half of the movie with Ryan before I went on to my trip to go see my family. I ended up finishing this one on the plane to visit my family, and I was like sobbing. This one was so good. I was surprised by this one too because I almost ended up DNFing it because it was just like kind of going on a lot at the very beginning about a particular mouse, and I wasn't really intrigued by the mouse at first, but then slowly it became one of my favorite characters. The story itself, just the way that it's told, the people that you end up caring about, the way that there's like this magical element involved, it's just the whole thing stuck with me so deeply. I cried when I read the book. I cried when I watched the movie. Ryan cried when he watched the movie with me. All of it was fantastic. So I was obsessed. I love this one and I gave this one 5 stars. I followed that one up quickly with Powerless, and I had been wanting to read Powerless by Lauren Roberts for a while. I also gave this one 5 stars. This one I mentioned in my tier ranking video, but I actually could not put this one down to the point where my mom was like, you absolutely have to just like go hang out with the family. You've been reading so much. And it was just so good. Basically, this one is a fantasy kind of Hunger Games vibes. So there's different kinds of people that live in this society, and there's a bit of a magic system. So some people's magic is more developed. I forget exactly what they call the different things. I think it's like elites and something else, I forget. But anyway, point is there's no ordinaries anymore, which are people who don't have any kind of powers at all. Our main character, Peyton, is actually an ordinary, but she's been disguising herself and pretending like she has like really low level powers for a really long time. And she ends up getting thrown into this set of games, kind of like a Hunger Games type of vibe. So it's very high risk, but also there's a love interest in this book, and just the whole thing was so good. I could not wait until the second book. So honestly, I just ate the whole thing up. I loved the relationship that was in this book, just the whole thing. If you guys haven't checked it out and you guys like kind of like young adult fantasy type books, highly recommend. It really just gave me Hunger Games vibes, and I think I was looking for something like that ever since the Hunger Games came around, so it was great. The next one was Daisy Hates The Great Undoing, which is the 4th book in the Magnolia Park series, and this one I ended up giving 4 stars. I remember listening to this one as an audiobook. I feel like lately I've been really enjoying, or actually actually not lately, but like throughout the whole series, I really liked the Daisy Hates books more than the Magnolia Parks books. The whole series is kind of like Gossip Girl vibes, except the Daisy Hates books, like basically each book in the series alternates between whose perspective it is. So Magnolia Parks is with BJ, and then Daisy Hates has a couple of different interesting relationships, but she in herself, like her being, I like more, if that makes sense. Like, I just like that she is part of this like mob type family and just like their whole background. Just I'm obsessed with the whole thing. So I really liked this book a lot. I honestly can't tell you like the details, only because I remember something ends in like a crazy cliffhanger, but I'd probably have to rewatch some kind of like video about what exactly happens, because I don't know what happens in the first Daisy Hates book in comparison to the second one. But I am very excited for the next one. The only thing is, I just like am not really into these books for like reading them. I really like listening to them as audiobooks. I just feel like they're not books I'm dying to read physically, if that makes sense. I don't know why, like in my brain, sometimes I can classify some as like books that I want to read versus like I don't mind listening to the audiobook. And I feel like I lose a little bit of information in audiobooks, but I just like, I don't feel like I need it in this type of book. So anyway, I did give it 4 stars. I guess the fact that I don't remember a whole lot about it shows that maybe I should have given it a 3, but I just remember a certain relationship in this particular book, which I obviously can't get too deep into because it'll spoil some things, but I really liked that relationship. Okay, the next one is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. And this one I rated 4 stars. This one is about a woman who finds herself at the center of a true crime podcast. So basically she befriends another podcaster and she's like, I have a story to tell, and it's extremely crazy and wild. And in some ways, this kind of gave me similar vibes to The Housemaid is Watching, or like the Housemaid series in general from Frida McFadden, only in the sense that I don't know who to trust in this world. I don't know who's lying. I don't know who's telling the truth. I don't know if our narrator is reliable. And the whole thing was like very fascinating. I liked the thriller aspect, and it just like kept you on your toes the entire time. And again, like you were constantly questioning what you should believe in. That being said, I just feel like some little instances, like for some reason, it just wasn't a 5-star. It just didn't give me that 5-star feeling. And it just, I don't know. I didn't think that it was a 5-star for me personally, but it was just like a tried and true thriller. That's kind of it about this book. I really liked it though. The wind is picking up like crazy. The next one is Rabbit Hole by Kate Brody. So this is actually my friend's sister-in-law, and I really liked this book. I gave it 5 stars. I think that it got some mixed reviews because it was falsely marketed, I think, as like a thriller mystery type book, but I just didn't feel like it was supposed to be a mystery thriller. It was more like someone actually falling down a rabbit hole. Like, I think that the title is perfect for what this book is. Basically, this person has a dad who went missing. Is it her dad? Sister. Her sister went missing, and then her father killed himself. This sends her down a rabbit hole trying to understand why her sister went missing, why her family, like why she's gone through all of this tragedy. The mental jumps that she makes are so fascinating. I think that for people who have experienced obsessing over something, it was very true to how your brain can make conclusions when they're not actually there. And just in general, like, I don't know, just being able to mesh things and be like, oh yes, this makes perfect sense. It was pretty fascinating. I really liked the way that the main character thought. I liked the way that she tried to rationalize things. I just liked all of it. So this one I gave 5 stars. The next one that I read was The Maid by Nita Prose, and this one I actually found in a little free library near me. I gave this one 4 stars. It's so funny because this one almost reminded me, like the synopsis reminded me a lot of The Housemaid is Watching, and for a while the 2 books were popular at the same time. But this one is very different. Basically, this one is about a girl. Her name is Molly. She's a maid, and she is, I don't know what I want to call her. Like, she's kind of just, she's not even naive. She just like doesn't really have social skills, and so she's just like kind of oblivious to a lot of things that are happening. She doesn't really understand a lot of nuance when people are talking to her. She doesn't really get jokes or sarcasm or anything like that. Because of that, people tend to take advantage of her. Basically, something happens at the hotel that she works at, and she she finds herself mixed up in it. And so because of that, I guess you would classify this as like a cozy mystery. I'm realizing now, I don't think I've ever read cozy mysteries until this book, where it's like much lower stakes, but something big is still happening and very important is still happening. And I kind of liked the main character. She was just kind of goofy in her own way. There is a second book to this series and I have not picked that one up yet, but now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should at some point soon. I just feel like this one in general was very different. Like our main character and the way that she talked and acted and the whole thing was just different. So I rated it 4 stars. I think it deserves that rating. I flew through it. I read it in a couple of days, but I don't think it was like so different and out there that it deserved 5 stars. So the next one was The Fury by Alex Michaelides. I think that's how you say his name. I forget every time. And every time he comes out with a new book, I look up how to say it and then I forget. The Fury. This one took me from February 6th to February 21st to read. I did not like this book at all. I gave it 2 stars. There's a few 2 stars in here, but this is one of like 2. I don't usually give books 1 or 2 stars because I'm usually DNFing it at that point. I have a love-hate relationship with Alex Michaelides and his books because I think that some of them are really well done. I love his storytelling and his writing in general is very lyrical and really wonderful. Honestly, I really like his writing a lot. But the downside is that I think that he adds in a lot of Greek mythology, which sometimes can be interesting, but it's similar to the concept of not wanting a twist to be something supernatural. I don't really want a twist to be a Greek god. It doesn't work for me. So I didn't care about any of the characters in this book. I didn't really care about the plot in this book. I didn't care about anything in this book. I don't know if part of the problem is that I was traveling while I was reading this book, but I just didn't care about any of them. And then the plot twist came about and I didn't like it. So I gave it 2 stars. I think this is sadly like potentially the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know if I'll pick up another Alex Michaelides book in the future. I hope, crossing my fingers, that that's not true because again, I do like a few of his books, but I think I would really have to see what other people review his books first before considering picking up another one, just because like Silent Patient was good, but I couldn't with this one. The next one is First Lie Wins, and this one's by Ashley Elston. I gave it 5 stars. I think reflecting on this, maybe I would have given it 4 stars, only because I don't remember every detail about this book, and I remember in the moment really loving it, but I feel like I remember all of my 5 stars. Like I remember a lot of the details of them, and that's kind of what makes them a 5 star. I remember this one is about a girl who her job is like she uses different identities in her job, and basically she's like on a longer term assignment. She doesn't actually know who her boss is. She like vaguely knows him, but like she typically deals with somebody else. And part of her job is to assume these identities and then like discover something about somebody and then like turn that information over to whatever party requested the information. I remember it just like all going wrong and weird, and the twists and turns were so insane that it was like trapping me in. Like I read this one so fast. I really loved it. I literally read it in like 2 or 3 days, which is pretty speedy for me. And I remember liking this one a lot, and I loved our main character. She was kind of like a badass woman character. It kind of reminds me of 0 Days by Ruth Ware, if you guys have read that one. Yeah, I don't remember all of the details of that one, so maybe I should revisit and give it a 4, but I remember the feeling, and when I think of the book, I'm like, oh, that was a good book. I really like that book. But I think that's one that I could probably reread and be just as excited to read again. So maybe I should give it a reread. I don't know. The next one is Hello Girls by Brittany Cavallaro and Emily Henry. I was really trying to go back and reread some of the backlog for Emily Henry because I had never, not reread, I shouldn't say reread, read the backlog because I have not read all of Emily Henry's books. I've read starting from Beach Read and onward, but before Beach Read, she had written other types of books and she was kind of in like a reading slump, and that's what eventually led her to Beach Read. So I thought I would read some of her backlog, and I didn't really love this one. I gave it 3 stars. It was co-written by another author, but basically it's about these 2 girls. I can't remember if they're related or if they're just like really close best friends, but they come from very different worlds, and they decide together that they can't wait until they're their 18th birthday or whatever it is, they want to escape and they just like want to leave and go do their own thing. But it goes through all of these crazy twists and turns and just trying to escape, dyeing your hair in a gas station bathroom and that kind of thing, and like trying to lie to so many different people and fake different things, fake a death, that kind of thing. And it was a little too fantastical for me. So honestly, like thinking back on this, I almost think I should have given it a 2-star, but back in February I gave it 3 stars. So I guess I'll stick with that. I think I wanted to be a little bit nicer, but it's like 2 to 3 stars for me. My camera died. I needed to get some water, but we're back. We're here. So the next one was Want to Know a Secret by Frida McFadden. I want to know when this one was published. I gave this one 2 stars. It was published in 2021. I remember this one was about this YouTuber who had like a cooking show on YouTube, and basically she, at the end of like every, or like during every YouTube video, I forget what it was, but anyway, point is she would always say that like she had like a secret ingredient, or like here's the secret to doing XYZ type of baked good. Eventually she started getting stalked, and with every message it would be like, do you want to know a secret, blah blah blah. Like it was kind of giving me Pretty Little Liars vibes, but it just, I don't know, it just didn't hit the mark for me. This one was really bad with Frida McFadden's tendency to repeat herself at the end of every single one of her chapters. So this is the only time I'll say this in this video. I know I've said it a couple of times in other videos where I read Frida McFadden books, but she tends to do this thing where she just like has a chapter and then the last paragraph of that chapter repeats what just happened in that chapter and like reiterates things, and then it has like really weird rhetorical questions where it's like, why wouldn't he want XYZ? Am I overthinking this? I don't know, maybe it's fine. And just like for some reason that just like really bothers me, and I think she's probably gotten better with it, but yeah, in this book it was really bad, so I ended up giving it 2 stars. All right, and here is the first classic of the year, Frankenstein. I gave this one 3 stars. I was actually pretty intrigued by this one. It took me about a month to read it, so I started at the end of January and ended it at the end of February, but I was just like slowly reading a few chapters here and there. I think this one was very interesting. I had always been intrigued by Frankenstein and just didn't really know what it was about, and I was pretty fascinated with it. I only gave it 3 stars because it's not a classic that totally trapped me in or like made me want to abandon any of my other books to read, and I try to really keep classics on the same tier level as I would any other book, because they're classics, yes, but I want to enjoy them just as much as I would any other book. But obviously, as you guys know, this is about a scientist who creates a monster, and that's sort of all I knew about it. I didn't know anything else. Obviously, from cartoons and media in general, we like have an idea of what Frankenstein is, but the whole story was actually fascinating, where it was whoa, what was that noise? It was basically this monster, whatever, creation that developed its own mindset. Like slowly it was learning more about like who it is and how to be more human-like, and that was pretty fascinating. I really liked it a lot. So okay, come here. He got scared because there was a loud noise. I ended up giving it 3 stars overall. Yeah, I think it was a good classic. I'm sure there are better classics out there, but we'll continue to explore classics in this year too. Okay, now we get into Flock, which is the first book in the Ravenhood series. I gave this one 4 stars. This was my very first book club book, and my friend chose it. I was not into this book. I'm surprised I gave it 4 stars. Looking back on it, the rest of the series I just didn't enjoy, but the first one was okay. These books are, like, I had no idea what it was going into it because the synopsis on Goodreads is like the first paragraph or 2 of the book, so it doesn't actually explain anything, and it's just basically like, I grew up really sick and like something about a sacrifice, and so it sounds like it's gonna be almost like a thriller, which is what I thought it was, but no, it's just like a love story where this girl falls in love with 2 different boys. So anyway, it was interesting. There's a whole secret society portion of this series, and a lot of like weird things happen, initiations happen, again, secret society type stuff, but I just think that like the love story was a huge part of it. So I don't know, I didn't love it. It wasn't my favorite. And I'm gonna skip ahead a few books into Exodus, which is the second Ravenhood book. I gave this one 3 stars. This one was really hard for me to read, like really hard. I feel like the story took a weird turn and I just didn't like it. I think that it went way too smutty for me, first of all. I did not know it was going to be that smutty. And then on top of it, I didn't, like, a character dies and I just, like, he was one of my favorite characters. So then when he died, I had like nothing to look forward to in the rest of the series. Our main character randomly falls in love with a different person, which also frustrated me because I was like, if you're going to claim that you love these other 2 boys, then how are you going to fall in love with a third person? It was a whole thing. I wasn't into this whole series. I think my friends really enjoyed it, but I wasn't into it. So that one I gave 3 stars. And just to skip ahead, we'll go into the third book as well, which it's not on my 76 books, but I DNF'd it. I just couldn't do it. I think I got 30% of the way through and it's supposed to be, I think, like 20 or 30 years in the future. And I couldn't do it. I want to know, like, I almost want someone to spoil it for me, or like maybe I should go on TikTok and like watch a video about it, but I just didn't like the series. Like, every book got worse and worse to me, and I think there's supposed to be a 4th one of some kind, or maybe it's like a novella or something from someone else's perspective, but I already know that I have no interest in reading that, so I'm just not even gonna go down that route. Okay, I'm gonna lump these all together, but I read the Throne of Glass series. I think I would have to give this series like a 4-star overall. I say that because the first few books, so Throne of Glass, I loved. I like, as a standalone, like, this is the kind of book that when I was growing up, I was obsessed with. I loved this book. So I gave it 5 stars. I gave Crown of Midnight 5 stars as well. And this is one of those series where each book I can kind of distinctly remember what happens in each book, but I just kind of remember what happens as a whole in the whole series. Assassin's Blade, which is 5 different novellas packed into one as like one story, all prequels, I gave 5 stars. And I read it, there's not controversy, but different people have different takes on what order to read it. I read it in publication order, so I read Assassin's Blade 3rd, and I really liked reading it 3rd because I feel like reading it first would have set me up for failure. Like, instead, I knew what was going to happen, but I wanted to know the backstory as to how we got there, and I really liked that a lot. Heir of Fire, we were introduced to some new characters. I think it was Heir of Fire. It was either Heir of Fire or Queen of Shadows. I can't remember. One of those two. We were introduced to a new set of characters who I was obsessed with. At first, I was annoyed by them, but then I like went on Reddit and everyone was like, yeah, we're annoyed too, but trust me, just keep reading and you're going to totally change your mind. That's going to be one of your favorite characters. And they were so right. And then it kind of went downhill from there for me with the series. Empire of Storms, I gave 3 stars. Tower of Dawn, I was obsessed with. I gave it 5 stars. And that's one of them that, like, I remember every detail of that book. I love Kale. So many people hate Tower of Dawn, so many people hate Kale, but I'm obsessed with that character. I love him. And then Kingdom of Ash, I gave 2 stars. It was way too long. I just feel like Sarah J. Maas has really good setup and then she disappoints me. And I feel like the same thing is happening with ACOTAR. I haven't actually read the last ACOTAR book, but I already know that I'm gonna feel the same way. So I have to read that eventually, but Kingdom of Ash is what, like, between Empire of Storms and Kingdom of Ash, everything else I really enjoyed, but those two really killed me. Okay, the next one is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, and this one was so good. I gave it 5 stars. This was my book club pick for my very first book club. I loved it. It's also a show on Apple TV, so I really liked it. The show is kind of different from the book, but close enough that like you get the point and all of like the crazy twists and turns and things like that. It was really fun to have read the book and then watch the show. And first of all, it was slightly different, so it wasn't like just revisiting everything that I already knew, but it was close enough that I knew when crazy things were going to happen. And I was watching it with Ryan and he didn't obviously know what was going to happen and he was freaking out, and it was so fun to watch. But if you guys don't already know, basically this is about a guy named Jason, and he one day is kidnapped. He's a professor at a local college and he has his life. He likes his life. He has a wife, he has a kid, but one day he's kidnapped and basically shoved in this box, and when he comes out of the box, he's in another world that looks just like his, where he lives in Chicago, but everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're back, like welcome back, oh my gosh. And he's so confused, and it turns out that basically this box can send you into alternate realities, and so he has to go back and find the reality that he's from. And it's crazy, like the mind-bending craziness that happens. And then like just there's this one plot twist in particular that it's so interesting, because once you understand what's happening and like how the world works, or like the science behind how everything works, you would think that you would catch on to what was happening, but actually you don't. And so then it ends up being a plot twist, and you're just like, oh my god, how did I not see this coming? So in theory it could be something that's predictable, but I feel like everyone who I talked to about it did not predict it, and so it made it really cool and really fun. I overall loved it, and again, watching the show too, the show was so good. I think that the changes that they made needed to be made so that it would be a cooler TV show, but the book in itself was so great too, so I loved everything about this one. The next one I read was also a book club book. It was I Who Have Never Known Men. I think it's a modern day classic, if I remember correctly. This one was chosen by one of my friends, and I gave it 4 stars. The one downside to this book is that it has no chapters, so it's just one really long book. I think it's 175 pages, but when there's no chapters, that is just one really long big chapter. But basically it kind of gives me like Truman Show vibes. It's basically about this person, this woman who has lived in kind of like a bunker her whole life. There's, I want to say like 35 or 40 women living with her total, including herself, and there's these men who are guarding the door, and one day they just run out and leave, and the women don't know what day it is, what time it is, they don't know anything. They've been stuck in this place for so long. This girl has never known anything except for this bunker that she's lived in. At first they get kind of freaked out, and they don't know if they should leave the bunker or if the men left because something really bad happened, or like why they just like ran off. So they get kind of nervous, and they don't initially leave, but then eventually they start to explore a little bit further and further each day. They come across other bunkers, and basically it's this exploration, and we follow our main character trying to figure out what happened, where they are, why the world is the way that it is, and things like that. And it was actually very interesting and like made you think inwardly a lot. I think that for that reason, it was a really cool, different type of classic. And just like what these women go through and everything that they choose to do and everything that they're able to learn is just really fascinating. The only thing about this book that I like kind of love and hate at the exact same time is you never actually find out why or where or when or what. Like you don't have the information, which part of me loves that and part of me hates it, because that's just like how life is. And like you don't have information sometimes, so like that's just like how it works. Like that's just life, and we don't always have every answer given to us. So I kind of liked that piece of it, so I ended up giving it 4 stars. I clearly liked it. I remember a lot of details about it. I almost could have given this 5 stars, but it was definitely slower at points, so that's why I did not. The next one was also an audiobook. This one was Magnolia Park's Into the Dark, which is the 5th book in the Magnolia Park series. I gave this one 3 stars. I do actually remember more about this one. This is the last one on the Magnolia Park side, and there's supposedly going to be 2 more books in the series from what I understand, and both of them will be Daisy Hates books. This one very cleanly wrapped up the story between Magnolia and BJ. You get a lot of information about why they are the way that they are and how they ended up that way, and just like more of like the prequel essentially. Like it kind of goes back and forth, but they do a lot of like reminiscing, and that gives you more information about their past. I also just like the way that this one ended. I feel like it wrapped up in a really neat bow. It wasn't something that I would have like physically read. Like I think I liked it because it was an audiobook, and I like the actors that they choose and that they actually have like a male and a female actor, not like a girl trying to do a guy's voice or a guy trying to do a girl's voice. I think that like it was good and it was nice and I liked it, but I don't think it was like anything, like I wouldn't necessarily be like, you have to read this book. It was good. I liked it though. I'm gonna just kind of talk about as like one big huge thing, because technically it's 5 volumes, but I read the Heartstopper series. This one was so cute. This was my first graphic novel from what I remember. I mean, like I guess I kind of read graphic novels here and there when I was younger, or like I think once in college, but this is my first like real graphic novel and I thought it was really cute. I gave, just to give you guys quick star allocations, I gave the first one 4 stars, the second one 3 stars, the third one 3 stars, fourth one 3 stars, and fifth one 3 stars. So basically the first one I gave 4 stars and everything else I gave 3 stars. This one, it basically follows these 2 boys, Nick and Charlie, and they both attend a all-boys school, and Charlie is out as gay, but nobody knows that Nick is gay. And so first of all, Charlie just has like a little crush on Nick, but he's like a star athlete in the school and all that kind of stuff. And it really puts you back in high school love type feelings, like all of the little things that mean a lot, like if your hands are kind of close together, or if you get selected as lab partners, like that kind of thing. And I feel like those emotions that were talked about in this series were so accurate, like so accurate and dead on. It kind of like put me right back into that headspace and remembering what it felt like to be around your crush. And I really loved that. The whole series takes you across a couple of different years in their life, and basically going from like them in high school and then them exploring different colleges and then them studying abroad. And I think it was just like a really cute, well done graphic novel series. I would be interested in reading more by this author, maybe not in the graphic novel type genre, maybe like an actual book by her, because her storytelling is fantastic and the emotions that she brings out in you are great. I think it was a really great series, cute, and it went by so fast because it's a graphic novel and because you can like see the photos, you can like really picture what's going on. This also became a Netflix series, so I think a couple of seasons are out. I actually don't know how many seasons are out, but at least a couple are out, if not all of it. So if you wanted to watch it instead of read it, you could always do that too, but truly each volume you could probably read in like a couple of hours. The next one is If Only I Had Told Her, which is the second in a series. It's a duology. The first one is If He Had Been With Me. The first one was such a sad book. This one is by Laura Nowlin, and I gave this one 3 stars. This one I also read as an audiobook, and I think I just like didn't know if I was gonna like this one. I heard from other booktubers that this is one of those ones that like didn't really need to be a book, but you know, like it was what it was. But I thought it was good. I remember this one being like a continuation essentially of like what happened after the ending, because the ending of the first book is extremely tragic. The male main character and the female main character finally tell each other that they like each other and that they want to be together. They're like childhood friends that grew apart, but in actuality they both really liked each other this whole time and like both had a crush on each other. And you find out that the main character, the male main character, dies, and you actually find that out at the very beginning of the first book, and then how he dies is iterated in the second half of the book, or at the very ending. And so it's a continuation. Something crazy happens in the second book that you find out pretty early on, and I think that puts like a whole wrench in everything. It made me really emotional, I will say that. I think this one was good when I remember being like not in the best mood, like I was already kind of in a sad mood, and I read this as an audiobook and it put me into tears. It was really well done. But this author I think has done that twice for me now, like in the first book that happened and in the second one. So it's another one where like I just don't feel like it needed to be there, but I really did like it. And I was talking to one of my friends about this book actually, and she liked this one more than the first one, which was very interesting. So if you read the first one, you're going to want to read the second one, but I don't think it needed to happen, but I liked that it was there. The next one that I read was The Honeymoon Crashers, which is a novella after The Unhoneymooners. I gave this one 3 stars. This one's actually only an audiobook, which I didn't really realize until I was listening to it. I remember The Unhoneymooners. I don't remember what I gave it, but I thought it was good. I wasn't like obsessed with it, but I thought that it was a good story. I think it was kind of interesting because the first half was completely different from the second half, which I didn't really love, but the story as a whole was interesting. But what I did like about The Honeymoon Crashers, it was like a production. There were multiple, like probably 15 different voice actors, and there were sound effects and just music. the whole thing. So it was like watching something on TV, which was such a cool experience. I've never read something like that, and I'm considering doing that for like the ACOTAR series because I know they have that too. But yeah, it was really interesting. It basically follows at the end of the Unhoneymooners, or like as a part of the Unhoneymooners, the person who's having the wedding doesn't end up happening, or like it ends in divorce if I remember correctly. Anyway, she goes on this like, I'm not going to be dating anymore, like I had my chance at marriage and it's just not going to happen, and she ends up finding love. So that's what it's about, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. Again, I don't think it needed to be a continuation in the series, but I thought that the production was really cool and really well done, and for that reason I think it was cool that they only released it as an audiobook too, which I don't think I've ever seen before, so I liked it. The next one that I read was One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. Ruth Ware is kind of like Alex Michaelides for me, where I either love her books or I hate her books, but she has more books, so I have more tolerance for her for some reason. But One Perfect Couple, I gave 3 stars. This one was about a couple who goes on this like reality TV show to a remote island that's deserted, and basically they're competing to figure out who the perfect couple is, but you could be recoupled. In theory, you could be like breaking up a relationship. And so our female main character is not really wanting to go on this trip, but her boyfriend really wants to go on this trip, and he's like a internet personality, and so like this is going to be great for his career and that kind of thing. So she decides to tag along because fine, like I don't want to mess up your career kind of idea. And everything goes wrong. People are dying, people are abandoned on this island, and like the whole crew leaves and can't come back, and so then these people are stranded on this island by themselves during a storm. It really makes you question who you can and cannot trust, and I think it was really well done like the whole time until the end when I discovered who actually was doing everything. I truly didn't know, and I was like always having different theories and things like that, but I think I gave this one 3 stars because when I did find out what it was, it just like wasn't that impactful. Like it was kind of like you thought that it was going to be going in one direction, and so then because you thought that already, you were like, maybe it'll actually go in this other direction, and then you could like create these crazy theories, and then the theory was actually, or like the solution was actually like very simple. So I don't know, I was like fine. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it, so I gave it 3 stars. The next one was A Funny Story by Emily Henry, which I gave 5 stars. I think I've given most of Emily Henry's books 5 stars except for Hello Girls, obviously, but since Beach Read, I'm pretty sure I gave almost all of her books 5 stars, if not 4. This book was something that I was anticipating all year. Honestly, around like April or May every year, I like look forward to reading anything by Emily Henry because it's always when she publishes her books. This one was super good. It was about a girl and a guy who each are engaged, and then the engagement, or like one is in a relationship and then one is engaged, I think, and then the relationships end up breaking off because their partners fall in love with each other and they've been childhood friends. So then our main characters end up moving in together because they have nowhere else to go, and obviously they end up falling in love. It was just such a fun, wholesome, actually truly funny story. Like I thought it was hilarious. I loved our 2 main characters. I think Miles is one of my favorite main characters, like male main characters in these like romance type books that I've ever had. Like I'm obsessed with him. I think that the conflict that they had was very genuine, and I feel like a lot of the problems were like real problems and didn't feel like made up, like I'm gonna choose not to talk to you kind of problems, which sometimes irritate me. So I think it was honestly really well done. I really liked it a lot, and I have nothing else to say. 5 stars. All right, we are officially in the June time frame, I think. We have a lot of books. I didn't realize how many books that we actually had. The next one I read as an audiobook, which is Running Wild, which is, what's the series called? Simple Wild, the Simple Wild series. I gave this one 3 stars. I read this one as an audiobook. I distinctly remember like running while I was listening to it. I didn't want to read this one because the first 2 plus a novella all follow one main character, and then this one just like completely changes characters, and I just don't love when like you've spent so much time with a certain character and then it totally changes perspectives. But this one was basically about one of the friends of a main character. She's a vet and they're all in Alaska, and basically she meets this musher. I think that's what it's called, the people who like race dogs. It's just their love story basically, and honestly it was like pretty wholesome, pretty cute. I don't think it was anything too different than any other love story, but I do think that it was cool that it was about mushers and like in Alaska and like a slightly different environment from what I'm used to in comparison to maybe like a beach type book or something like that. So that was fun. And it also just entertained me while I was running. So I gave it 3 stars. The next one was Powerful, which is a novella in the Powerless trilogy. So Powerless was the first one that I read. Reckless is the second book, and this one goes in between the two. This one just hyped me up to read Reckless, which I was so excited about. I gave this one 5 stars, which is honestly pretty hard for a novella. I just loved this one. It kind of goes back in time for like what was happening during Powerless, but it follows a different character, like our main character's best friend. So you get like the in-between of what was happening with her, while basically in the main and Powerless, you would see her best friend like pop in and out. And so in Powerful, you would see what was going on with that best friend, if that makes sense. Like you would get those in between moments. And I really liked this one a lot. It made me fall in love with that character so much. Like you already love that character, but you fall in love with that character so much more because of this novella. And the ending, you already expect to be tragic, but it's so tragic. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. If you guys want to read it, you can. I really, really liked it a lot. Next, I read When in Rome by Sarah Adams, and I gave it 2 stars. Oh, I feel bad because I feel like everybody liked this one, but this just, I think I read too many romance novels in like 1 year or something. I don't know. Like I have a cap, I've learned, and I think romance novels are cute and fun and I like them, but I think after a while they kind of have to be something different. Otherwise they just feel the same to me. And this one was just like pop star girl gets stranded in a small town and finds a baker. I don't know. It just like, I didn't like the characters either. I think that like was part of it. Maybe I just couldn't connect with them because I was listening to it as an audiobook, so I just didn't have as much time with them. But I feel like everyone raved about this one and I just wasn't into it. And I know that there's a second in the series, but I just like can't see myself reading the second one because I just didn't like the first one either. So yeah, I think that is what it is. I gave it 2 stars. The next one was The Housemaid is Watching by Frida McFadden. This one I gave 4 stars. This is the third and in theory the final in the Housemaid trilogy, but then there's also a novella which I read later in December. This one was interesting. It was, I think, 10 years after the second one takes place. So 2 of our main characters are now married and they have children. Something weird is happening with their neighbors. Like basically our main character Millie, she has always helped clients get out of like really bad domestic situations, and she's kind of like left that life behind. She started to do something different with her life, but something weird in this new house is happening and she can't really tell what's going on with some of her neighbors or like who to trust. And she also is starting to like suspect her husband of some things. And so the whole storyline was kind of cool. I did like it. I think that I really enjoyed for this one, and part of the reason I gave it 4 stars was that I liked that it strayed from what the original 2 were about, because the first 2 were so similar that I liked that this one was so different. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next one was Reckless. Like I mentioned before, the last book and novella are supposed to come out this year, so I'm really hoping for a redemption, but I gave this one 4 stars. I almost feel like it deserved a 3, but I like this world and our characters so much that I gave it 4 stars. But this is a continuation of the Powerless series. Basically, Powerless ends on a crazy cliffhanger. You figure out what happens and then you're left on another cliffhanger. It's more about this world, and our 2 main characters are essentially coming after each other and being forced to, one's running away and one is chasing her. You also start to get some new perspectives from other characters, which is very interesting, like very insightful to hear like what their thoughts are on certain things. But it just kind of fell flat. Like there's sort of this like interesting dynamic with the characters where there's like a romance, but also like they are supposed to hate each other. Our female main character is like a good guy and a bad guy at the exact same time. And I don't know, there's just like, there's so much you learn about like a resistance, and there's just so many different types of things that are happening, and it felt a little disjointed, honestly. I feel like, yeah, I think that's like the consensus, is that it felt a little disjointed. I think it has like second book syndrome, which like the first one is great, the third one's gonna be great, but then the second one is just kind of like there to bridge the gap between the 2. But I just feel like so many instances it could have like been a little bit better. So there were some really cute wholesome moments and like lovey-dovey moments too, but I'm hopeful for for the third one. I really hope that it redeems itself. The next one is The Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. I was nervous for this one. This was another book club book, and I've read Every Summer After, which is extremely similar to Love in Other Words, but I think a lot of people really love Love in Other Words, but I actually liked Every Summer After a little bit better. That being said, I also read that one first, and I did not read Meet Me at the Lake, which was her second book, because just so many people talked bad about it, and I just was like nervous to read it. But I decided to read The Summer Will Be Different, and I thought it was really cute. It's sort of that trope of best friend's brother. So basically our main character falls in love with her best friend's brother, and it's their love story. I don't really know what else to say about it. It's very summery vibes. It's really cute. Her best friend ends up finding out, obviously, that they like each other, and it's a love story. That's kind of all I can say about it. So I gave it 4 stars. Lessons in Chemistry was next on the list, and I gave this one 5 stars. I loved this one. I listened to this one as an audiobook as well. This one, though, made me feel so much more connected to the story because I listened to it as an audiobook. I don't know what it was about it. I don't know if I would have felt that way if I would have read it. But this one is just like very smart. It's about our main character named Elizabeth Zott, and this takes place in the 1960s. She's a chemist, and she thinks very much as a scientist. She's like very rigid in the way that she thinks and the way that she does things. I liked the way that she thought. I liked how quirky she was. We get some points of view from her dog, which are really fun and just like silly and goofy. And I really liked that take on it. Something kind of tragic happens to her, and she's basically trying to balance life in the 1960s while being a career woman and a mother and just like juggling it all. And I think that this one was like very empowering. This one also has a TV show to accompany it. I think it's on Hulu. I haven't watched it. I started it, but I just never finished it. I just am not the best with TV shows sometimes, and I just don't know if it would give it the same power. But I don't know. I haven't seen all of it, so we'll see. But I did really like it. It was very powerful. By the end, I was crying, and I just really fell in love with Elizabeth Zott and her life and her tenacity for life and just like all of the things that she's able to do with her life. She's just a really cool character, so I really like this one a lot. The next one that I read was Cujo by Stephen King, and I gave this one 5 stars. I read this one mostly because I picked up You Like It Darker by Stephen King, which is like a set of short stories, and there's a story in there called Rattlesnakes that was supposed to be a continuation or like a story to follow up Cujo. So I decided to read Cujo first because I wanted to make sure that I was getting like the full impact on it. I thought it was really interesting. The concept itself was really cool. It's basically about this dog that goes rabid and traps a mom and her kid in a car. That's like the main event that's happening, but you also get so many different perspectives of like what's going on, where the dog is. Like you again get like perspective from the dog. You get perspectives from like neighbors or like the husband, and like trying to figure out what's going on because this is set in I think like the 80s or so they can't just like call someone up on their cell phone and be like, hey, I'm trapped in a car, come help me. And so it's just very interesting. I think that it was really well done. I liked it a lot. It was very different, and the ending was not at all what I was expecting. I've heard that Stephen King doesn't really love this book and that he kind of like regrets some things, and that's why he ended up writing Rattlesnakes, but I thought it was really well done the way that it happened. Like I really liked it a lot, so I give it 5 stars. I read Poor Things by Alasdair Gray, which I gave 3 stars. This one's another classic, and obviously there was recently a movie produced with Emma Stone as the main character, I believe. I never saw the movie, but this is like a take on Frankenstein. So similar idea of like a girl who was created and she's sort of coming to terms with like who she is. I think a lot of people had problems with the movie for various reasons. I think something about talking about people on the spectrum from what I understood, if I am remembering correctly. But the book is like, I can only speak for the book. The book is more about figuring out who you are. And I think that's kind of like what Frankenstein is about too. It's not necessarily about the way that the creation acts, but it more so about coming into who she as a person is and like becoming human. She starts off obviously like very childlike, similar to Frankenstein, where like he's learning his boundaries, she's learning boundaries, like she's learning about the world and like taking in all of this information. This one was definitely more sexualized than Frankenstein, which I thought was interesting. I don't know that it needed to be that way, but I guess that's like a reality of life, is like understanding all of these different things. So it was pretty interesting, I think. I definitely think that this is not one that I was like dying to read every single day. I also read a few chapters here and there until I finally finished it after about a month. So I gave this one 3 stars. The next one I read was Song of Achilles, which I gave 3 stars. I didn't realize that this was a retelling of the Iliad. That sounds so silly. I don't know if like maybe it's more digestible. It was pretty good. I did like it. I listened to this one as an audiobook and it was interesting to relearn a lot of these things, but yeah, I didn't realize that it was a retelling. So I think that it felt a lot less powerful to me because it was a retelling. I kind of wish I would have known that from the get-go. Because I was like a little underwhelmed by this story, I ended up not picking up Circe, which I know is the next in the series. I would still be intrigued to pick that one up, but I haven't done it because I was just like, meh, I don't want to read another one. So maybe I'll pick that one up this year. We'll see. The next was You Like It Darker by Stephen King, which is that set of short stories that I mentioned. I actually really liked this one a lot. The total compilation of all the stories ended up being roughly 500 or so pages, if I remember correctly. And it's one of his newest set of short story collections. It was published in 2024, so I got very lucky to be able to get it from the library so soon. And I gave it 4 stars. I think I really enjoyed a lot, especially like the first few stories that I read were actually spooky. Like some of them I could not go to sleep because I was so nervous and scared. And then others just kind of fell flat to me. So I think it's a little harder to judge a compilation of stories, but I liked that these ones actually, or some of them actually scared me because I somehow have chosen a lot of Stephen King novels that are not actually horror, which is so funny because he's the king of horror. I don't know how I've accidentally done that, but I liked this and I liked that I got a little taste of his horror genre. I read after that 28 Summers by Ellen Hilderbrand, and this one I gave 5 stars. This one is basically about a couple. It follows one of our main characters, and this couple has an affair every single year on, I think it's Labor Day, whatever holiday is in September. I'm pretty sure that's Labor Day. They have an affair every Labor Day, every single year for 28 summers, and in between, basically every single chapter starts with like what happened in that year, which was really fun to read. But also on top of that, you go through on an annual basis, like not just what happened during their meetup, but also any of the in-betweens and like details from that year, which I thought was very interesting because they tend to have like tradition of like what they like to do every single year. And so if we were reading the same thing every year, it would have probably gotten a little bit boring. There's times where these two people are in relationships and they still decide to meet up. There's times where they're separated from other partners and they decide to meet up. So overall, it's just like this really interesting love story and this dynamic of like, if we choose to be together, will this not feel like we want to be together anymore? Which is a very interesting question of like, part of the lore of this relationship was that they were doing this thing where they would meet up every single year and like they had this tradition and they weren't sure if they were going to feel the same way about one another if they didn't do this particular type of tradition, it was a very interesting concept. I think that some people didn't love this book because they don't like the idea of cheating couples, but also I think like if you can move past that, the concept itself was very interesting and like what happens and the storytelling was very interesting. So overall, I really, really liked it a lot. It does follow up with a novella, which I also read, and that one I gave 3 stars. It's called The Sixth Wedding. The Sixth Wedding was more about like what happens after the very end of 28 Summers because the end of it is like pretty sad, honestly. It did make me tear up a bit. I don't know. I think I gave it 3 stars because I feel like sometimes these novellas happen to explain to you more of like what happened after the fact. But sometimes as a reader, it's nice to just like imagine your own ideas of what happened after or like how things played out. Like I don't need someone to kind of like tell me every single detail about what happened. So I don't know. I did like it, but I just don't know if it needed to happen. And it's very interesting that this has been like a trend of over-explaining almost in books. All right, now I went on to my Holly Jackson kick. So I'm gonna go through all of the Holly Jackson books that I read really fast, just to kind of go through them. Some of them are in a series, some of them are separate standalones. So the first Holly Jackson book that I read was 5 Survive. I gave it 4 stars. This one is about a set of friends that are going off on a vacation for, I think, spring break, if I remember correctly. And essentially they get stuck, stranded in this like RV in the middle of the forest, and someone's after them. Someone's like in the woods effectively attacking them. Like anytime one of them tries to leave, then they try to shoot at them or whatever. They're trying to determine like what is happening, like why is somebody after us? us? What did we do? Who is involved with what in our RV group thing? Because clearly people want answers. So I thought it was a very cool book because it all took place in like essentially one type of scene. There was a few like back and forth scenes or like cut scenes where you're going back in time about like something else that happened, but otherwise you're staying in this RV for the entire time and for the entire plot of the book, which was really, really cool. So I gave this one 4 stars, and it was a really cool introduction to Holly Jackson as a whole. The next one that I read was The Reappearance of Rachel Price, which had come out in 2024, and I also gave this one 4 stars. This one is about a girl who, her and her dad are part of this new Netflix documentary talking about the disappearance of her mom, Rachel Price. As they're filming this documentary, her mom reappears, and it's been 16 years, and so everyone is just basically like, what happened? Why did you disappear? Where have you been? Like, all these questions obviously are coming out, and the daughter is our main character, and she sort of has to decide if she wants to trust her mom or not, because obviously this is not really someone that she's actually gotten to know in her lifetime. She also doesn't know if what she's saying is truthful. She has to kind of, you know, obviously listen to what her dad is saying about what happened, but is also getting some weird information from her mom. So she's trying to like figure out everything that happened and like why and piece everything together. And the twists and turns are very interesting and crazy. I just didn't expect what happened to have happened, and I really liked it a lot. I think that this one had a really good, just really great twists and turns. I liked it a lot. I highly recommend this one. So then I went on to read the full Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. It starts off with Killjoy, which is a novella, which really is just truthfully a murder mystery dinner party, and it's very wholesome, and that's kind of it. And I really liked it. The ending is really funny, so I thought it was like a good little intro into who these characters are. It's only like 120 pages. And then I read Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Good Girl Bad Blood, and As Good as Dead, and all 3 of these I rated 5 stars. I think these ones are really good in the sense that like the first 2 were kind of more similar, and then the last one is very different. The whole story is fleshed out so interestingly. There's also a little mini romance in this series, which I really loved. I love the 2 main characters, and this is one of those series that when I was done with it, I actually genuinely felt sad and felt like I was missing my friends. So I really liked this one a lot. I read Too Late. I could not read this book. I did not like it at all. I learned that I just like don't really like Colleen Hoover books. It was about this girl who's in a relationship with a guy who's doing like really terrible things, and this guy is currently being investigated, and so a cop is undercover, and the girl and the undercover cop fall in love with each other. I did not like this book at all, and I couldn't read it because there were so many different things that were trigger warnings that I wish, like I read this one on my Kindle, and so I didn't see the page that had all of the trigger warnings. First of all, the first page, there was already a scene that like, I literally texted my friends, and this was supposed to be a book club book, and I was like, I don't know if I can get through this one. I did end up getting through it, and it was very fast paced, but I just didn't like those scenes. Like there was a lot of abuse that was happening. I also didn't like the way that, and I just don't like this in general, when authors paint a picture of like what psychosis looks like, or like what people with schizophrenia look like, or when they like misdiagnose schizophrenia specifically, or any kind of like mental health disorder, but specifically schizophrenia, I think can be very dangerous. I just don't like that she played into that. I think this was sort of like the nail in the coffin as well for me with Colleen Hoover. Like there's very few books that I've learned that I actually kind of like by her, but other than that, I just don't think I can do it. I have a few books that I previously downloaded or purchased because there were different deals that are still on my Kindle, so I may revisit those, but I just like don't think that her books are worth it anymore. I just don't think that I've been enjoying it. I didn't like this one at all. I have another favorite that I read, which was The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell, and I gave this one 5 stars. This one was by Robert Dugoni, and I've read some of his other books, which were like, I think it's the Tracy Crosswhite series. They're like a thriller type mystery series, but this one was more of like a character study on this character, Sam. Ryan's mom actually let me borrow this book, and I really liked it. It's basically about this boy who is born with red eyes, and it's this whole life story. Like his parents want him to go to Catholic school, but because he has red eyes, he's not initially accepted unexpected, and just like his mom's tenacity in forcing her way through and like forcing a normal life for our main character, and just like how he grew up and like the different things that he went through because he was different. Him also befriending the only black kid in the entire school, which was also very interesting because both of them were just like so different that they just accepted each other immediately. And then it goes into his adulthood as well, and him having a relationship and like what that relationship meant, and how sometimes he felt like he needed to settle in life because nobody would have accepted him otherwise, and just like all of these different things. I think that the whole story was so powerful. I really, really enjoyed it. It was such a beautiful story and just like very impactful. And I think that I've learned over the last year that these books that are like super impactful are what I like the most, instead of like romances and things like that. The impactful books are really interesting to me. So then the next one was The Heiress, and I gave this one 3 stars. This one, it was another book club book, and I don't remember too much about it, but basically it was about this guy who someone in the family dies, and so the estate is like given to him essentially, and it's been in his name for a really long time because the person who adopted him was who it technically belonged to. But there's basically always been this question of like whether that character was part of the family to begin with. And so then on top of it, he was adopted. And so like the family has like a lot of issues. And then because someone else ends up dying, everything kind of like gets brought into question again. And it just basically you go through all of the twists and turns of the family. The ending, I do remember, is very crazy. And like the reason why all of this stuff happened was kind of wild because it was like something that I just like genuinely was not expecting at all from this book. But I don't know. I don't know what it was about this book. I don't know if it was just like the storytelling wasn't all the way there for me or what it was, but I didn't love it as much as I thought that I was going to. It wasn't a bad book by any means, but it just like wasn't my favorite. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. Okay, so then I'm going to kind of go through these out of order a little bit, but I read Part of Your World, Yours Truly, and Just for the Summer, which are 3 books all by Abby Jimenez. They're in like an interconnected series. And I gave Part of Your World 4 stars, Yours Truly 5 stars, and Just for the Summer 5 stars. I liked that all of these ended up connecting. They're all slightly different. So like the first one is about a girl who is from a big city. She's a doctor, or I think she's a doctor, or is she a nurse? No, she has to have been like a surgeon or something like that. Something along those lines. She ends up meeting a guy from a small town, so they're from completely different worlds, but they obviously start to fall in love. And then Yours Truly was about 2 different surgeons who have very different viewpoints on things, but the female surgeon is the best friend of the female surgeon from the first book, so you kind of get more information about those other characters. And then Just for the Summer is about 2 nurses who are going to this program in the same hospital where our other 2 best friend characters are working out of. So you kind of continue to like get bits and pieces from everything. There's also another connection that ends up happening that I thought was really fun, but overall all of them are love stories. All of them are really fun, summery vibes. I just feel like they were super fun and summery, and there was a lot of real problems. And I think that's why with romances, I think I need like something that feels very human. It can't be like a fluffy, whatever kind of unrealistic type of plot. I need it to feel really real for me to enjoy it. So I actually really liked all 3 of these. I feel like if there were ever any miscommunications between our characters, it was for a very particular reason. So overall, I think that these ones were really well done. This was also my first time ever reading any Abby Jimenez, so I was very pleased. I liked her writing a lot. It kind of gave me Emily Henry vibes, so I'm excited to eventually read more of her backlog. The next book that I read was The Search Party by Hannah Rochelle. I don't know if that's how you say it, Rochelle. I gave this one 4 stars. This one was a really cool one. I had heard a bit about this one just from book talk and booktube in general, but basically it was about this family. They moved out of the city to establish this like glamping company or whatever business, and before they open, they decide to have some of their friends come over, but all of them have like different gripes with each other. Like basically basically this like friend group is kind of growing apart. They're also all older, so they have children. Like some of the children are in the teens, so they've had years of friendship together, and slowly they're obviously like growing apart, but this is kind of like gonna be like one of their last times all spending time together. And one of the children goes missing, so they basically go on this like long goose chase to figure out what happened, and then like when they find one person, then someone else is missing, and you kind of like realize that something sinister is happening. So it was actually very interesting. There were a lot of twists and turns in this one too. I think that some of the things that happened between some of the characters felt a little silly, but also like I knew that obviously it was that these characters had not seen each other for a really long time, so maybe they just like didn't feel comfortable bringing things up for whatever reason. They had a lot of like gripes over certain things that I thought was interesting. So yeah, I did really like it a lot, and I recommend reading it if you're looking for a rainy, cold mystery book. The next one is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, and this one is interesting. I actually don't know what type of genre this one is. Let's see what it says. Mystery, fiction, thriller, historical fiction, literary fiction, historical, suspense. It does feel like more of like a literary fiction. I think this one won some sort of Goodreads Choice Award. I gave it 5 stars. I really liked it. It's about this kid who goes missing, and then like years later, his sister goes missing. The sister never actually meets the boy because he goes missing and then she's born. It's interesting, like the way that everything happens. First and foremost, you end up eventually learning what happened to the boy, but also during the investigation with the girl, so many different things are uncovered. It's like this really rich family that owns this camp, and so there's a lot of secrets and a lot of like weird family dynamics and that kind of thing. And I think in that sense, that's why it felt more like literary fiction and not so much as like a thriller or mystery, but there's a lot of thriller mystery elements in it too. So altogether, it was just like this mishmash of different genres, and I really liked just the way that it all fell together. Was really cool to me. The next one was Still See You Everywhere by Lisa Gardner, and this is the 3rd in a series. It's the Frankie Elkin series. Basically, this one follows our main character, Frankie, just as a whole during this whole series. Frankie is a recovering alcoholic, and she also looks for people who are typically not looked for. So maybe someone from a very particular community or something along those lines. In one of the first books, she is visiting a Cuban community, if I remember correctly. And in this one, she's looking for a Hawaiian girl. It's very interesting. This one is weird because essentially what happens is a serial killer reaches out to her who's on death row, and she's like, hey, my sister went missing. I know I'm on death row, and I know that you probably don't want to help me, but I want to find my sister and just tell her I love her before I have to go. What unfolds is just wild. I don't know how else to say it. Like, I don't want to give you guys too many spoilers on any of these books, obviously, but this one was a really good one. I just love the character as a whole, Frankie. The whole series is really cool because you could technically read them as standalones, but you get a little bit more impact out of each of them if you read them all like back to back. This one, again, takes place on a Hawaiian island, and there's basically this like big development for this new hotel or something like that that's going to be created, and so she's there acting as if she's just working there, but really she's investigating, and she uncovers a lot, and it's very interesting, and it's a really like true mystery thriller, and I think it was really well done. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next series that I read was the Natural series. So there are 4 books plus a novella in this one, and I rated them each. Basically, I rated the first one 5 stars and the rest of them 4 stars. I would say that this one in general was like a 4 to 5 star series. Essentially what this one is like Criminal Minds, but make it teenagers. So essentially it is about these characters who are teens, and they all have some sort of like special power, but it's not like a supernatural power. It's more like they can tell if somebody is lying, or they can read micro expressions or things like that, and they're working alongside the FBI to help uncover what's going on in various different cases, initially cold cases, and then eventually they're moved on to be allowed to work on current cases. The first one really took me by surprise, I think, which is why I gave it 5 stars. Like the ending in particular is what I was shocked by. The second one, I thought was still really good, but it kind of felt very similar to the first one, so I kind of like didn't love that, but I think it was still like really well done, and like the twists and turns were still really good. And then from then on out, I feel like the author took a different route, which I was really happy with because I would have been pretty bummed if like they continued to just like do the same thing over and over again. From like the third book onward, it took this like crazy turn, and I feel like we got better insight into some of our other characters that we didn't have as much insight in, which was really cool. I do wish that the love story was like a little bit stronger. I feel like we had a really fun, cool, like little love triangle happening, but then like by the second book that was just like obsolete, and then the like love interest wasn't even there anymore. Like he was there, but like it wasn't important anymore. And so I feel like that part of the plot kind of like fell flat, but the rest of it was like really exciting. I feel like the chapters were really short and fast and really exciting and interesting. In that way, I think that it was really well done, and overall it just made it for a really fast, quick-paced reading experience. So overall I really liked it. Again, 4 to 5 star series. It's really hard to tell myself that it's a 5-star series because I think I said this in the last video. I kind of reserve 5-star series for like Harry Potter and things like that, but this one was a really good series, so I really liked it a lot and I highly recommend it. The Wedding People was the next on the list. I gave this one 5 stars, and this one is basically about this woman who shows up at a hotel because she wants to commit suicide, and she comes into a wedding party that's happening, and the bride is like, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. This is my wedding and I rented out the entire hotel." And the girl's like, "I don't know what I'm doing here. I didn't realize that you were having a wedding." And she somehow gets involved in all of the wedding stuff, and it takes so many different turns. It's so cool because our main character is at a point in her life where she just like doesn't want to be there anymore and doesn't care to be there anymore. And because of that, she has so many different views on like how people talk to her, what she cares about in terms of like how, like what she cares other people think of her, or what she doesn't care people think of her. And I just think that it was a really cool book that like again allowed you to like think inwardly about yourself and how you react to people, and think about the way that people think about you, and just like we only really have this life, which sounds so cheesy, but to not like let other people rule that. And I really enjoyed it a lot. This one I gave 5 stars for a reason. Like it just made me feel so many different emotions, and again made me think inwardly a lot and was very impactful. So definitely recommend reading this one. Next I read The Women, which is another 5-star for me. This one is by Kristen Hanna, and this one is surrounding a nurse that was in the Vietnam War. Her brother was serving in the Navy, and then she found out that her brother passed. She initially was trying to go meet up with him, but she wasn't accepted initially, and then eventually she was able to go to the Army, I believe is where she ended up. But right as she's about to deploy, she finds out that her brother dies, and she goes anyway. It was a very interesting story. It was very sad along the way. There is some love interests in the story. There's also just like the reality of war and like everything that she had to go through and endure. And then there's a huge chunk, like that second half of it is all about her returning from that, not really being accepted, because since she was a nurse and she wasn't serving on the front lines, nobody accepts her as a veteran. They just say that she happened to be in Vietnam while the war was happening, as if she didn't help the people who were injured or dying throughout the entirety of the war. I feel like I learned a lot from this book. Like there were so many different bits and pieces that I was intrigued by, and so then I went to go look it up after the fact because I just like didn't know about something or like some nuanced detail about the war. And overall I think like that's what Kristen Hanna does for me. Like I like that about her, is like she gets things pretty historically accurate. For me it was also just fun in general because our main character is from San Diego and lives in Coronado, and I grew up in San Diego, so there were so many different bits and pieces that like I recognized or like that I learned, like the Coronado Bridge and like when it was built, for example. So yeah, overall I really liked it a lot. It made me cry on the 3rd page, it made me cry on the last page. Like there were so many different crazy things that happened, and like her looking for acceptance from her parents consistently, just like so many different dynamics that you learn about throughout the book and like that you can potentially relate to as well. So I liked that bit of it too. The next series, or the last series that I read, was the Mindfuck series, which I've talked to you guys a bit about already in my last video. This one one is essentially, imagine the show Dexter, but a girl instead of a guy. So basically there's this girl, she's been wronged by an entire town. Some crazy stuff happens in her past, and she's taken time over the last 10 years to like heal, but also regroup as to how she would like to take her revenge, and ultimately decides to now take her revenge. But in the very first book, at the very beginning, she meets an FBI agent and she falls in love. So now she is a serial killer who is taking revenge on all these people who have done her and her brother wrong, while also dating the FBI agent who is the lead on her case. And it gets twisty and turny. Like, I feel like that's just what I've been saying about so many of these different mystery thrillers, but truly it gets twisty and turny. It's so good. The books are short, they're quick paced, they're really fast to read, so that's always really fun. The covers of each of the books look a little smutty, but it's actually not, there's only a couple of sex scenes, so it's like not too intense. And I really liked the storyline as a whole, honestly. I liked our main character. I think the best friend that she has in the series is very fun and interesting, and overall I just feel like if you're gonna have a serial killer have revenge on something like this, the stuff that happens is insane, like crazy, and honestly like they deserve what happened to them. So I highly recommend this one if you're looking for something a little bit quicker paced. It was very interesting and just like fun to read. Oh, and then also, I'm sorry I didn't mention, I gave all of the Mindfuck series 4 stars except the second one I gave 3 stars. So overall I would say this is like a 4-star series for me. So then the next one that I read was Middle of the Night by Riley Sager, and I gave this one 5 stars. This one is about a man who, when he was a kid, he went to have like a tent sleepover in his backyard, like not quite camping because he's in his backyard, but he was sleeping in a tent with his best friend, and his best friend goes missing and he has no idea what's happened to him. Now it's 30 years later, and over the course of those 30 years, he's been feeling obviously some regret about like not knowing what happened to his friend and just like overall wanting to know what happened to his friend. He eventually moves back to his childhood home. His parents don't live with him anymore. They're in Florida, but he lives in this home, and he's starting to sense that his friend is back, but in a supernatural way. I liked this one a lot because you get supernatural vibes from the very beginning, which I don't really mind. I just don't like when twists are supernatural. It was just like very fun and interesting. There are a lot of like real world things that happen too, like the whole book isn't supernatural, and the explanation is real world. It's not supernatural, which is even more exciting. I thought that if it was going to be a supernatural book, then like the boundaries could go to any extent because we don't know what's going to happen, but I think it was really well done. I liked that the main character was questioning himself throughout the entirety of the book. I liked the way that it ended. I liked that the reality of what happened was like a real life thing and not a supernatural thing. And I like that throughout the story you learn more about what happened that night, and you also learn more about our main character and other things that he's experienced. So overall, I think this one is a really good one. I feel like I just didn't really like House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, but all of his other ones have been pretty good. Like I really love his writing style. He writes very fast paced, which is exciting and keeps me interested in the book, obviously. So overall, I really liked it. The next one that I read as part of my 24-hour reading vlog, so you guys have probably heard me talk about this one, but I read The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. I read part of this as a book and then part as an audiobook, and I gave this one 4 stars. I actually really liked it. It's basically about our main character. She is perpetually single, and she feels like she's been single for way too long, but she's gone on so many dates and she just keeps feeling like they end poorly. She goes on this one really bad date, and as she's walking home with him, she's trying to just like leave him behind, doesn't want to be involved with him anymore, and he kind of tries something on her, and as she's trying to like shove him away, someone comes in to save the day, and then she never sees him again, and she's like, what the heck? That's the kind of person that I want to be with. And she slowly uncovers what's going on. Like eventually someone disappears from her life, and then she finds out why, and like I can't really like tell you guys too much unfortunately about it because I don't want to give away too many details, but it is pretty insane what happens, and I really didn't expect the ending at all. There were times where I felt like the book was a little too fantastical or like a little too far out there, but other than that, that. Honestly, I feel like it was pretty good and I liked it a lot. So I gave it 4 stars. I think it was like kind of perfect pacing for my 24-hour reading vlog. And honestly, most of the books that Frida McFadden writes, I have to say, like, are pretty fast paced and like there's always some kind of crazy twist at the end that you didn't see coming. And so for that reason, I feel like usually they're pretty reliable to get you out of some kind of slump or anything like that, which is why I chose it for the 24-hour reading vlog. And the last book of 2024 was The Housemaid's Wedding, which was the novella after the Housemaid series. This one can either be read between the second and the third book or after the third book. And I gave this one 3 stars. This one was effectively just about our main character, Millie, and she ends up getting married to somebody, and it is about her wedding day. It also goes into her dynamic with her family, which has always been very interesting and like touched on here and there throughout the series, but you get a little bit more information about that. And then there is one kind of sinister thing that happens, but it's not too deep or anything like that. I think the whole novella is like 120 pages or something, so it's not actually that long. And for that reason, the sinister thing is not that in depth. It is a very interesting one. You always are kind of like rooting for Millie. I think this is another one where it like just didn't need to happen, but if you wanted the extra information about what happens with the main character, then it is there. So I don't know that we needed that, but we all read it. So, you know, those are all of the books that I read in 2024. We went through a lot, so hopefully you guys got some good recommendations out of all of these books. And again, I have all of my reading videos in the description below. I also just released my December reading wrap up and January TBR on Tuesday as well. So if you guys have not watched that yet, check it out. Or if you guys also like to watch vlogs, you can watch my vlogs too. I have a whole playlist of them. Quickly, before I let you guys go though, I want to talk very fast about the books that I want to read in 2025. I created a 25 in 25, just things that I want to read. This is not a full list of everything. For example, I know that there's going to be another Emily Henry book released and I definitely want to read that. It's not on the list because I want this to be the books that I have either been meaning to get around to or just like for whatever reason have like looked at a million times or has been on my TBR for a really long time, and this is the year that we're gonna read it. So here we go. 25 and 25. The first one is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I just need to get to this one and finish this series or like finish as much of like what's released. A Secret History by Donna Tartt, I believe. I hear that this is like a really good, like the original dark academia type book, but I also hear that it's a little hard to get into, so I want to read it and try it out. Before the Coffee Gets Cold, this one is a shorter book, so I don't think this one will be too much of an issue, but I hear that it makes you kind of introspective and like think about different things, so I think that one will be fun. Tomorrow, I just had never read this one yet, and I have it on my bookshelf, so I figured this is the year we're gonna do it, we're gonna read it. Good Omens, I also have had this one on my bookshelf for so many years. I love Neil Gaiman. I haven't really read much by Terry Pratchett, but Neil Gaiman is one of my favorite all-time authors, and I haven't read anything by him in so long, so I figured this is the year that we finally tackle Good Omens. Red Dragon, same kind of idea. I love the Hannibal movies, but I never read any of them, and I've had Red Dragon on my list or on my physical shelf for a really long time. The Secret Messenger, I don't remember who this one is by, but I've had it on my shelf as well for a really long time. And this one is a historical fiction, and I've learned that I really like historical fiction, so I figure we'll read it this year. Dune. I'm gonna try to read this one this year. I told myself that I wanted to read it. I haven't seen the movies because I wanted to read it, so we're gonna try it. We're gonna try this year. I have quite a few Frederick Bachmans on the list. A Man Called Ove, I think is how you say it. Beartown and Anxious People. All 3 of those are by Frederick Bachman, and I've been wanting to read all 3 for a while, so want to prioritize that this year too. And then The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I have picked this one up from Barnes & Noble so many times and just never actually read it, so I think this is the year. I think I saw Sarah Caroli reading it and she was crying about it, or like crying over the book, and that's kind of what sealed the deal for me, and I just need to pick it up. The Tattooist of Auschwitz. I also have picked this one up a million times. I think it's either been made into a movie or a TV show now, so I want to try this one too. I always am intrigued intrigued by it, but then I just never end up buying it. So I want to just finally get to it. The Atlas 6, I think this one is more of like a fantasy novel, maybe? I don't actually remember, but I remember reading the synopsis at some point and adding it to my TBR because it sounded really interesting. So that one's on the list. The Graveyard Book, also by Neil Gaiman. I have had that one. I think it's in the garage actually, but I have had it for a really long time. A friend bought it for me. Actually, one friend bought it for me, and then I think my mom might have also bought it for me. So I have actually 2 copies of this book, and I still haven't read it. So we're prioritizing all of these books in 2025. Caraval is the next one. I've just heard so much about this one, and I think it has like a main series and then a spin-off series, and I want to finally get to it and read that one. The Paris Apartment. I haven't read a Lucy Foley in quite a few years, so that is on the list. Six of Crows. I think that one's also another, I don't know if it's fantasy or what exactly the genre is, but this one has been on my list for a really long time. I think this was like Book Talk Book a couple of years ago, so I think I'll finally dive into this one. 1,000 Boy Kisses. My friend has been begging me to read this one, so I told her finally in 2025 I'll do it. Between Us. This one is by Vari McFarlane. I think that's how you say her name. I've heard great things about this author from Haley Pham. You guys probably know Haley Pham on YouTube, so I thought that one could be an interesting one to start off with. And then also Bunny. I've just heard this one is weird, and I want to know why, so I added that to the list. A Clockwork Orange. I've just never read this one, and I feel like it's now like a classic of some kind, so I don't know anything about it, but we're gonna try it out. The House in the Cerulean Sea, more of like a cozy fantasy from what I understand. One of my friends didn't really love it, but also she hadn't read any fantasy up until that point, and now that she's read fantasy, I'm curious if she would have rated it differently. But I have just had this one on my list for a really long time. I've heard it's really cute and wholesome and sweet, so my computer went out. All the Light We Cannot See. This one is now a movie, I think, and I want to read this one very badly before I watch the movie, so we're gonna try that one out. The last one I've heard mixed reviews on, but sounds very interesting. My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This one I think is about a person who becomes depressed and decides to just like take a full year to just like do literally nothing and just like be on her couch. And I'm intrigued by that, and like I wonder if it's something that will make me introspective or if I'm just gonna hate it. I feel like that book is like all or nothing for me, so we will obviously find out. So those are all the books that I read. Those are all of the books that I'm hoping to read in 2025, and I'm sure there's obviously more. Like I mentioned, for example, the Emily Henry book. There's going to be another, I think it's like Onyx Storm. It's part of the Iron Flame, what's the series called? Oh my gosh, Fourth Wing. How did I forget that? It's part of the Fourth Wing series. That one will probably come out, and a few others. So I'm very excited for all of the things that are going to be coming out. I'll obviously keep you guys updated as I continue to read all of these books, which I'm so excited about. That is all that I have for today's video. So thank you guys so much for watching and being here with me. I appreciate every single one of you, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.